Welcome back to the final session on philosophy of education. We stopped last time on the role of culture and diversity in education philosophy. So, educational values and practices are culturally shaped, reflecting particular worldviews, traditions, and social arrangements. Philosophy of education must grapple with cultural diversity, examining how different cultures, culture contexts produce different uh, educational priorities and challenging the assumption that any single approach is universally appropriate. What counts as good teaching in one culture may be viewed quite differently in another. Western in individualistic cultures tend to emphasize independence, individual achievement, and self expression, while many collectivist cultures emphasize independence, group harmony, and respect for authority. These aren't better or worse, they are different, reflecting different cultural values and social organization. Educational philosophy must recognize this diversity rather than universalizing particular cultural approaches. Cultural variations in education. Recognizing cultural influences means acknowledging that concepts like good students, effective teaching, or vulnerable knowledge vary across cultures. What one culture values as independence, another may view as as disrespectful individualism, since sparking up to challenge a teacher might be praised for critical thinking in the context, condemned for disrespect in another. What one tradition emphasizes as collaborative learning, another may see as cheating. Working together might be valid cooperation or prohibited academic dishonesty. Depending on culture context, these differences aren't deficiencies, they're legitimate variations requiring respect and accommodation. Educational philosophy must examine its own cultural assumption, recognizing that approaches developed in one cultural context may not transfer directly to others. This doesn't mean anything goes. It means thoughtfully adapting a practice to cultural context while maintaining core ethical principles. Then, let's go to promoting inclusivity and respect. Philosophical commitment to human dignity and equality demands inclusive education that respects and values diverse learners. This means creating learning environments where all students feel welcome and valued, recognizing and building on students' cultural knowledge and experiences rather than treating them as deficits. Using diverse examples and perspectives in curriculum so all students see themselves represented, employing varied teaching methods that to reach different learners rather than privileging one approach and challenging stereotypes and prejudice actively rather than remaining neutral. Inclusion isn't just adding diverse faces to curriculum or celebrating multicultural holidays. It's fundamentally rethinking whose knowledge counts, whose voices are heard, and whose ways of knowledging are valued. This requires philosophical work examining assumptions about knowledge, learning, and what makes education valuable. Culturally responsive pedagogy. Gloria Letson buildings developed culturally responsive pedagogy, emphasizing three key dimensions: academic success, maintaining high expectations and providing support to all students achieve cultural competence, helping citizens understand and value their own cultures while navigating multiple cultural contexts and critical consciousness, preparing students to critique and challenge inequitable systems. Teachers build on students' cultural strengths rather than treating culture as something to overcome, maintain high expectations for all students rather than lowering standards, develop cultural competence in themselves by learning about students, communities, and cultures, and prepare students to critique all and change inequitable systems rather than just adapt to them. This approach is grounded in philosophical commitments to justice, pluralism, pluralism and education as liberation. It challenges deficit models that blame students' backgrounds for educational struggles and instead examines how schools may fail to build on students' strength. Uh, Asset-based approaches rather than viewing diversity as deficit to overcome asset-based approaches recognize linguistic, cultural, and experimental diversity as resources enhancing learning. Students at home learn languages are valuable resources, not obstacles. Bilingualism is an asset to be developed, not a problem to remediate. Community knowledge enriches curriculum. Students, families, and communities possesses knowledge schools can draw on. Varied perspectives enhance classroom discourse and problem solving. Diversity of perspective improves thinking and creativity. Asset-based approaches flip deficit thinking of its head. Instead of asking what's wrong with these students, they ask what strengths do they these students bring. Instead of remediation, they pursue enrichment. Instead of assimilation, they value pluralism. Philosophically, this reflects belief that knowledge exists in diverse forms, that multiple ways of knowledge of knowing are valid, and that diversity strengthens rather than weakens educational communities. Philosophical foundations. Culturally responsive education resets on several philosophical principles: universal human dignity and worth. All students deserve respect and educational opportunity, regardless of background. Epistemic justice, recognizing diverse ways of knowing, not privileging one culture group's knowledge as universal truth. Democratic pluralism, valuing difference rather than requiring uniformity, seeing diversity as strength, not problem, transformative potential of education. Schools can promote equity rather than simply reproducing inequality. These principles that challenge educational praxis, reproducing inequality, and demand continuous reflection on whose knowledge counts, whose voices are heard, and whose interests are served. This philosophical work is essential for creating educational systems serving all students justly. Integrating philosophy into educational policy. Educational policy isn't merely technical or administrative. It embodies philosophical commitments about education's purposes, how learning occurs, and what society owes its children. Philosophical analysis provides tools for examining policy assumptions, evaluating alternatives, and ensuring policies align with ethical principles and educational goals. Every policy decision, from funding formulas to graduation requirements to teacher evaluation system, reflects philosophical positions about what matters in education and how to achieve it. Making these philosophical dimensions explicit enables better policy making grounded in clear values and sound reasoning rather than just political expediency or uncritical tradition. Four key steps for philosophical policy analysis. When examining educational policies philosophically, follow these steps. First, identify assumptions. Every policy rests on assumptions about learning, knowledge, human nature, and social organization. Making these explicit enables critical evaluation. What does this policy assume about how students learn, about what knowledge matters? Second, consider alternatives. Philosophical thinking opens space for imagining alternatives to current practice, questioning whether thinking must be as they are, what other approaches might achieve similar goals. Third, evaluate consequences. Policies should be judged by their actual effects on students, teachers, and communities, not just attentions who benefits and who is burdened. Fourthly, apply ethical principles. Policies must align with ethical principles like justice, equity, respect for persons, and democratic participation. Does this policy treat all students fairly? Does it respect human dignity? The importance of reflective policy making. Reflective policymaking grounded in ethical principles requires ongoing philosophical analysis rather than uncritical acceptance of efficiency, tradition, and political expediency. Policymakers should engage with philosophical questions about education's purposes, not just assume we all agree. Consider how policies affect diverse students differently. Aggregate statistics can mask disparate impacts. Examine whether policies promote or hinder equity and justice. Some policies claiming neutrality actually reinforce inequality. Ensure policies rest on sound understanding of learning. Policy should be formed by learning, science, and create opportunities for democratic participation in policy formation. Those affected should have voice. This is hard work requiring philosophical sophistication, but it's essential for policy serving educational purposes rather than undermining them. Example, early childhood education policies. Consider policies expanding early childhood education. Philosophically, this reflects beliefs that early experiences profoundly influence development. The philosophical assumption is that early intervention can change life trajectories, that society bear responsibility for ensuring equitable opportunities, not just parents, but community and the education should compensate for inequitable circumstances rather than simply reflecting them. Implementing requires continued philosophical reflection about quality, what makes early education effective, culture responsive, do programs respect diverse parenting practice and culture, the values, family engagement. How do we partner with families respectfully, and whether programs achieve intended equity goals are we actually reduce inequality. Philosophical analysis doesn't provide simple policy answers, but answers policy discussions address fundamental questions about purposes, values, and justice rather than merely technical questions about efficiency and implementation. Uh, Summary: the transformative power of philosophy of education provides an essential framework to critically examine and continuously improve educational practice, policies, and systems, rather than accepting education as given the way things have always been done. Philosophical reflection enables us to question assumptions, evaluating alternatives, and align practice with values and evidence. This critical capacity is fundamental to educational progress and professional growth. Without philosophical reflection, we simply reproduce existing practices without understanding whether they serve students well. With philosophy, we become conscious, intentional educators capable of continuous improvement toward clearly articulated goals grounded in sound principles. Core themes revisited throughout this course. We have explored how philosophy helps educators accomplish several crucial tasks. First, balancing knowledge transmission with personal and social development. Education must both both pass on cultural knowledge and enable individual growth and social progress. Second, navigating tensions between individual freedom and social responsibility, honoring students as individuals while preparing them for social participation. Third, addressing inequalities and remoting justice, using education to uh, create more equitable society under rather than reproducing inequality. Fourth, responding thoughtfully to contemporary uh, challenges, addressing issues like technology, diversity, and sustainability, philosophical rather than just technical. Finally, developing a coherent personal teaching philosophies, guiding practices, becoming conscious, intentional educators. These themes aren't separate, they're interconnected dimensions of philosophical work in education. Dispositions of relative educators. Effective, philosophically grounded educators cultivate several key dispositions: critical inquiry, questioning assumptions and examining alternatives rather than accepting things as given, lifelong learning, modeling intellectual curiosity and commitment to growth, not claiming to know everything already, professional development, continuously refining understanding and the practice based on experience, evidence, and reflection, ethical practice grounding decisions in principles of justice and respect rather than just convenience on tradition, cultural responsiveness, honoring diverse perspectives and ways of knowing rather than universalizing one approach, purposeful innovations, changing practices thoughtfully based on philosophy and evidence rather than chasing fads of resisting all change. These disposition characterize educators who are reflective, principled, and effective across their careers. Philosophy as professional foundation. Philosophy encourages lifelong learning, critical inquiry, and ethical responsibility, not just for students but for educators themselves. By engaging deeply with philosophical questions, educators develop intellectual humility, recognizing limits of courses. Um, Recognizing limits of our knowledge and remaining open to learning, openness to revision, willingness to change our minds based on evidence and argument, and a commitment to continuous improvement, never being satisfied we have arrived, but always growing. These dispositions are essential for navigating educational complexity and uncertainty while maintaining clear purpose and ethical grounding. Teaching is incredibly complex work involving diverse students, multiple purposes, limited resources, and constant change. Philosophy doesn't make this is easy, but it provides tools for thoughtful navigation. Further reading and resources deepen your understanding of educational philosophy through these essential resources, carefully selected to provide diverse perspectives and accessible entry points into this rich field. Philosophy of education is vast. We're only scratched the surface in this course. These resources enable you to pursue topics that particularly interest you, engage with primary sources from important thinkers, and continue developing your philosophical understanding throughout your career. Think of this course as an introduction opening doors to deeper exploration. Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. The Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy's section on philosophy of education, updated in 2025, provides comprehensive peer-reviewed articles covering major topics, thinkers, and debates in educational philosophy. It's freely accessible online with extensive bibliographies for further exploration. This is an excellent resource when you want uh, authoritative scholarly treatment of specific topics, whether historical figures like um, Dewey's of Freire, philosophical traditions like progressivism or existentialism, or contemporary issues. The bibliographies point you toward deeper reading on topics that interest you. Key foundational texts. Several texts are essential reading for anyone serious about educational philosophy. John Dewey's Democracy and Education from 1960 remains fundamental for progressive education. It's Drew's most comprehensive statement of his education philosophy. Paulo's Ferrari's Pedagogy of the Oppressed from 1968 is essential for understanding critical pedagogy and educational as liberation. Neil Nodding's Caring feminine approach to ethics and moral education from 1984 offers important perspective on care ethics and relative approaches to education. Bill Hawks, teaching to transgress from 1994 provides powerful insights on education, liberation, and engaged pedagogy. These aren't easy reading reads, but there is immensely rewarding and will deepen your philosophical understanding profoundly. Online courses and lectures. Multiple platforms offer accessible philosophy of education content. Coursera features courses from universities covering classical and contemporary perspectives, many free to audits. EDX provides courses on education theory, policy analysis, and philosophical foundations. YouTube hosts recorded lectures from leading philosophers, including Michael Apple or Michael Apple on critical pedagogy, uh, Maxine Green on authentic education and imagination, and Henry Jurix on public pedagogy and democracy, the philosophy of education, society, archives, conference presentations, and webinars on current topics. These resources make high quality philosophical education accessible regardless of your location or resources. Then, academic journals. For those wanting to engage with current scholarship, several academic journals publish philosophy of education research. The Journal of Philosophy of Education is the premier international journal publishing both theoretical and practical scholarship. Educational Theory is an interdisciplinary journal exploring philosophical, social, and cultural dimensions. Studies in philosophy and education publishes international research on philosophical problems. Educational philosophy and theory features critical perspectives on educational thought and practice. Ethics and education focuses specifically on ethical dimensions of educational policy and the practice. Most are available through university libraries or sometimes open access online. Then let's go to professional organizations. Join the Philosophy of Education Society, PES, or regional affiliates for conferences, publications, and networking with scholars and practitioners engaged in philosophical inquiry about education. These organizations create community around philosophical work in education, providing opportunities to present your own thinking, learn from others, discuss contemporary issues, and participate in the ongoing conversations about education's purposes and praxis. Membership often includes journal subscriptions and conference access. Conclusion: your journey as a reflective educator. You completed an intensive exploration of educational philosophy, examining fundamental questions about education's purposes, methods, and ethical dimensions. But this conclusion marks not an end but a beginning, the start of your ongoing journey as a reflective, philosophically informed educator. Everything we've covered in these 3 hours is just the foundation. The real work is applying these philosophical tools and perspectives throughout your career, continuously reflecting on your practice, refining your philosophy, and becoming more conscious and intentionally and intentional as an educator. Philosophy of education isn't something you learn once and complete. It's an ongoing practice of critical reflection that characterizes excellent educators throughout their careers. Embrace philosophy as a tool, Use philosophical thinking to shape your technical and learning environment. Let philosophical questions guide your curriculum choices. What knowledge matters the most? Whose perspectives are included? Your pedagogical decisions, which methods serve my goals, how do I balance different approaches, and your interactions with students, how do I respect students' agency while providing necessary guidance. Philosophy isn't separate from practice. It's the foundation, making practice purposeful and coherent. Without philosophical grounding, you're simply following prescribed methods without understanding why. With philosophy, every decision becomes international and intentional and principled. Continuously reflect and refine. Your education beliefs and practices should evolve through experience, reflection, and ongoing learning. Regularly examine whether your practices align with your stated philosophy. Are your are you living your values or just talking about them? By willing to revise both beliefs and practices based on evidence and argument, intellectual humility means changing your mind when you learn better. Growth mindset applies to educators as much as students. We all, we are all continuously learning and improving. The teaching philosophy statement you draft today should evolve throughout your career as you gain experience, encounter new ideas, and deepen your understanding. That evolution doesn't represent inconsistently, it represents growth. Commitment to critical thinking, foster critical thinking, equity, and lifelong learning in your students. By modeling these qualities yourself, create classroom environments where questions are welcomed, not just your questions, but students' genuine questions, where diverse perspectives are valued, not just tolerated, but actively sought and engaged, where intellectual risk taking is supported, students feel safe proposing ideas, making mistakes, and revising thinking. Help students develop the philosophical dispositions they will need for democratic citizenship and personal flourishing, questioning, analyzing, considering multiple perspectives, constructing reasoned arguments, remaining open to revision. These aren't just skills, but habits or minds characterizing thoughtful, engaged citizens and fulfilled individuals. Your next step, craft your teaching philosophy. We invite you to begin crafting your own teaching philosophy statement today. This document will serve as your philosophical compass, articulating your beliefs, goals, and commitment as an educator. As you write, draw on philosophical concepts exploring in this course. Consider what you believe about learning, knowing human potential, educational purposes, your responsibilities as educator, how you will create inclusive environments, and how you will continue growing professionally. Be specific, abstract statements like, I believe all children can learn. Don't guide practices, be authentic, write what you genuinely believe, not what sounds good. Be grounded, connect philosophical principles to practical examples, showing what your philosophy looks like in action. Your philosophy uh, will evolve. Remember that your philosophy isn't static. It will evolve as you gain experience and insights. What matters is beginning the process of conscious reflection that will characterize your entire career as a thoughtful, effective, philosophically grounded educator. You might look back to or at your first philosophy statement in 5 years and they cringe a bit, that's good. It means you've grown. The goal isn't perfection, but thoughtfulness, not final answers, but ongoing inquiry. Philosophy of education is a practice, not a destination. Your philosophical journey begins now, and it will continue throughout your career as you continuously examine, question, refine, and improve your understanding and practice. Thank you for engaging deeply with these ideas over these 3 hours. You now have philosophical tools and frameworks that will serve you throughout your educational career. You understand you understand major philosophical traditions, can analyze educational practice philosophically, and are prepared to develop your own coherent teaching philosophy. Most importantly, you understand that effective education isn't just about techniques or methods, it's about clear purposes, sound principles, and ethical commitments. Go forth and as reflective philosophical educators committed to continuous growth, critical inquiry, and education that serves all students justly. Your philosophical journey as an educator has truly just begun. Thank you so much once again. See you next time in next subject. Until next time, ta for now.